As dads, some days we feel like we have all the answers, and some days we feel like we don't have a clue. If that describes you, you're at the right place. This is the All Pro Dad Podcast. My name is Ted Lowe, and joined today by my co-host Bobby Lewis and our special guest, Buck Buchanan.
What's up?
Buck, glad to have you back, buddy. Hey, each week, as you know, what do? We take a look at one question. We explore what we've done wrong mostly, what we could do, what we could do better, what we could do right, and maybe what some experts say, and then leave people with one pro move, which is simple but powerful. And so we just diving in right now. Bobby, what is our question of the episode?
Question of the week. How do I know when to correct my kid? Notice, not if we should be correcting when things go wrong, but how do I know when to correct my kid? Timing matters. We're going to discuss that today.
Yep. But before we dive in, other than yourself, who is the best dad that you've ever known when it comes to correcting their kid? Like when you think, oh, that guy, he seems to be doing it right. Maybe it's somebody a little bit down the road. We talked about, for me, we talked about this on a previous episode. I would watch my buddy and I've watched him parent. It's so cool. I've got to watch him parent when his kids were tiny before we had kids. And now they're all young adults with their own kids, every one of them. So it's been so fun. When they were little, he'd pull them to the side and talk to them, whisper in their ear, both mom and dad, but especially dad, because mom's voice was already calm. But it was these moments of watching that type of correction and just how he would parent when they would have a consequence. He wouldn't shame them with it. He would be like, oh, this is disappointing, that this is your consequence, with no sarcasm. And so that's been a great model for me. What about you guys? Is there any other dads that you've seen going, I like the way they talk to their kids or they handle when they're not doing so well?
Phil from Fresh Prince.
Phil from Fresh Prince.
I thought you were going to say Phil Dunphy.
Phil Dunphy.
From Modern Family.
He's actually a great dad, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Well, I do like Uncle Phil, but I'm going to go and say I feel like my dad did a pretty good job.
That's good.
I think mainly because maybe this is good or bad, and maybe it's bad. I don't know. If you're a psychologist out there,
let us know in the comments.
I was going to say, don't weigh in, okay? But like, I can't think of I can only think of maybe one time when I was really disciplined by my dad. But I also know that discipline was a big part of like growing up. There's consequences to everything that you do. And so I feel like my dad did a good job, and I can't remember any time of it letting it fester. I think my dad was very good at timing when it came to correction, but I also think my dad was also good at not letting things slide for too long, or his timing was always pretty good with that. So I'd say my dad is a good example for me to live by, and I'm glad that I have that in my life. I know that a lot of people don't. So
I like that. That.
A good dad.
A good dad.
Yeah. Danny Tanner.
Danny Tanner.
No, I'm just kidding.
We're going through our 90s sitcom dads.
Carl Winslow.
Carl Winslow.
Gosh. No, I've seen dads do this well. I think the dads who don't freak out in the moment, those are the ones who kind of keep their cool. Those are the ones that I want to emulate.
It's good.
I think it's real easy for us to blow up and, kind of react quickly with good intentions, but it doesn't always have the best results.
Right. I think we were talking about this before we started, this whole episode of how do I know when to correct my kid? Everyone was like, instantly, right now, whatever they needed, all the time.
Hourly.
We're dads. That's what we do. We pick it out and we fix it. And so I think there's some things that we can process this. Research shows this, but also experience has taught us this. There's some things we can process, kind of some questions, some grids that we can kind of think some of this through. And I think the first one is just, should I say this? Should I say anything?
Yeah.
I can just be sometimes with our kids. I could just get in correcting mode, especially when they were younger, because basically kids are always doing something that doesn't look quite so safe, or it looks like it's childish behavior.
Yeah. I like to do woodworking in the garage. I'll make some things for cutting boards and stuff around the house. I enjoy the hobby. And so I have a stash of wood on one side of the garage that I'm going to use for projects. And we have some scrap wood as well that's laying around. And so I've made it clear to my son before, like, don't touch this. You know, this is like the nice stuff I'm going to use. If you want to use some wood, like here's some pallets or what, you know, you can use this sort of stuff. And I guess I hadn't made it clear enough. And so he got out his hammer. He bought a hammer with his own money. He was so proud of this hammer. He got some nails and he's nailing stuff together. And I come back in the garage. I'm like, oh, now there's holes all around. Like, you just nailed these pieces of wood. I was going to use these for something else, but he was so proud of what he had done. And he's like, Dad, look, I nailed them together. Look, they stay and they fit. And I was fuming inside. I was like, I was going to use that. but I wanted to say something.
Black walnut.
Do you know how expensive that 2-inch piece of wood? But I didn't say, and I think that was important because should I say something? Probably should. I mean, you could argue that I should have, because I did tell you not to do this. Like, this was mine and I was going to use it for something specific. And now I can't because you not ruined it, but you got holes all in it. Right. Should you say something? It's a tough call sometimes. You know, it's not always cut and dry.
Well, I think you should say something, but maybe it's not always, maybe it doesn't always have to be like the heavy correction of it. But like, my boys need to know and acknowledge that, like, hey, I saw that kind of thing, you know, but now's not the time. I think it's using discernment. And
you know what, like, I said?
Now's not the time.
In that situation, you know what I told him? I said, hey, nice job. Which is weird because it took a lot of effort on my part to not be like, I told you not to. Nice job. But I said, hey, like, you did a nice job. You got the nail, you drove them through straight, like, you got everything right. It's not wiggling. You did a good job. And then in my head, I'm like, I'm gonna come back to this because, like, as much as I praise you for doing something, he was so excited that he got it right. In my head, I'm like, he needs to know he shouldn't have used that. He should have used something else, you know?
But you took the pause to consider it. And I think that's the big, should I say something? Because I'm thinking you did the right thing to say, hey, look, Dad. I mean, those are those moments. Who cares about wood at that point? Like, you can circle around. Hey, buddy, I like what you built. Remember, this is your pile. Because you go, at the end of the day, he's more important than anything. And so I think that was a great move to go. I mean, you know,
I'd say it's easier when they're younger too, when it's cuter.
Probably, yeah.
You know, like when your
hey, Dad,
kid,
I spray painted the car.
when your kid makes pancakes in the kitchen and like it's everywhere, and you're like, oh, great. You know, so yeah, I think it's easier when they're younger and it's cuter. But I do think that as my boys are getting older, it is harder for me not to like want to correct it immediately and everything, and not acknowledge the fact that maybe they did do something that was kind of hard to them, you know, but like you said, then now I can't use that wood.
Yeah. I saw a video once and it was talking about how we should let kids make mistakes, supervised mistakes. And they used the example of an egg. They said, all right, you have eggs, like you're going to make breakfast or whatever. And you ask your kid to, help you. They pick the eggs up out of the fridge and they drop 2 of them on the floor. Are you going to blow up at the kids, or are you going to say,
yes, you drop kick the kid? No? While they're holding I'm just kidding.
No, don't do that. But no, what happened was they actually learned something in that process. Yeah. The eggs are fragile. Yeah. You got to be careful. You know, you have to don't carry 9 of them if you can only hold 3 of them at a time. So they're actually learning. So you might not be helping anything by saying something right there in the moment. Should I say something about this, or should I say, okay, just clean it up, you made a mess. It's okay.
Yeah. And let's talk about this in terms of stages, because Buck, you make a very good point. Like, should I say this when they're little? One of the things that I watched, one of our friends' little boy, he was so hyper. He was always climbing up stuff. I mean, it always looked like the kid was after danger. He's 3, 4, 5, and you do watch going, wow. And I would watch the dad let him do things that I would be like, oh, I don't know, man. That just seems. And he says, I'm afraid if I tell him no as many times as I need to, it's going to make him an angry kid. And I thought, that's pretty wise. And so,
or kill his adventurous spirit or something like that.
And so I thought but it's at least, I think on this one, it's just, should I say something about this? So you push forward a little bit more, and they're maybe fighting with brothers and sisters at different ages. Talk about that a little bit. Should I say?
Well, I think with age comes the fact that we've had this conversation before. And so to me, when I'm correcting my boys, or when we're talking about something that they've messed up on or something like that, for me, it's usually a lot of times saying like, hey, we've talked about this before.
Right.
You know the clear rules of the parameters, stuff like that. You have the information. You've been given the information. I think that's why it's easier when they're younger, because they're still absorbing that information, and you're still kind of setting the parameters for them to live their life in. But at the point where they're older is when you're saying, okay, parameters have been set.
Right.
In this situation A, situation B, whatever, you know the rules, you know what we need to do, and you're breaking those. You're kind of going outside of those. And so it's kind of having logic with them in the correction, but also kind of saying, the ground rules have been set. Right. And you're clearly not doing it.
That's a great clarifier when you say, should I say something? You go, I think I need to say something because they knew what was coming, or they knew the expectations. I think that's a great one. Did they know the expectations?
And it kind of helps me as a dad pull the emotion out of it.
Right.
If I say, first of all, if I set up the ground rules and the parameters to begin with,
right,
because then it does help me have kind of a backup system almost of saying, I'm mad about the situation, but I'm not blowing up right now because these are the rules. And I'm just trying to help you understand, these were the rules. These are the parameters.
Good and calm.
So it kind of helps me stay calm.
I think for me, the magnitude of the consequence determines how I handle the situation. So, my daughter is not driving yet, but we have some of her friends who are that age, they're getting ready to drive. Should I correct when you're not looking as you back up? Yes, there's a big probability that you're going to have a big accident here. The kid carrying the eggs across the floor, no, the magnitude of the, consequence is you broke a 30-cent egg. That's not a big deal.
So good.
But if there is potential for danger or potential for emotional harm or whatnot, yes, you should say something. But do you say it right in the moment or do you say it later? If you're backing up in the driveway, yes, you say it in the moment.
Right.
If they're touching the eye of the stove.
It's the same idea as
you're not
the
going to say,
right there.
Well, should I say something now?
Right.
Yeah.
Yes.
How much danger are they in?
Right.
That probably will help determine when we need to correct.
That's good. So it's, should I say this? And that bleeds perfectly, Bobby. Should I say this? Should I say this now?
Yeah.
Right. Like you said, if it's danger, there's no space for a heart. Should I say this right now? Yeah. I think one of the things, gosh, I wish I'd known this sooner, was if they're in the middle of even being happy with something, their emotional part of their brain, or sad about something, frustrated, to go, you can get them safe or you can get them calm, and then circle back around and go, okay, bud, let's talk about yesterday at grandma's house when you lost your mind because mom said no to the cookies. To take whatever that age appropriate thing is, let's talk about it. I don't know. I think they're able to hear about it. But sometimes like you said, you have to say it now.
Well, and I think for me, it helps me have a time for myself to have clarity of mind. Because even in the moment, I can be upset, and my anger or my emotion in that moment sometimes will overtake what the correct response should be from me. So when I have time to think about it, so really kind of maybe it depends on the severity of my reaction to the problem.
Yeah.
Maybe of if I know that I'm going to react, if I'm sensing that I'm reacting maybe over the top, then maybe I need to pause and calm myself down.
So good.
And then give some time for myself to cool. And then I can think clearer.
Everybody's more calm. Everybody can hear better. Oh, that's great. To go, I'm going to say, should I say this now? And if you don't have to, that might be a great gauge. If you don't have to, don't for now. If you more space, probably the better.
Yeah. If you can say it calm, then I don't know. Maybe you should say it right now.
This is
calm.
This is not a serious situation in any respect, but my son plays ice hockey and he has practice on Fridays, games on Saturdays. And so I go and I watch both. So I take them on Friday nights and I watch all the drills that they're doing. And they did a specific drill on Friday that came up in the game on Saturday, and he didn't do it. And he'd practiced it over and over and over on Friday. And I watched him. He did it great on Friday. And then the game situation came. He didn't do it, failed. The other team scored a goal because he was playing defense. He messed up. So I knew the answer was, okay, we just practiced this. And, it's not like his value is determined on how great he is on the ice hockey thing, but I want him to do well. And so I could have chosen to say it right then after the game when we're getting the skates off. But that wouldn't have helped because he was upset because he made a mistake and he knew he made a mistake. So I waited until the next practice on next Friday. And then on the way said, hey, remember the game last week? This happened. We talked about that during the practice. How could you do it differently? If I had said something right in the moment, it would just made him feel worse about it.
That's good.
The timing matters when we correct.
That's so great.
And we actually had a really good conversation about it on the way to practice the next Friday because he had calmed down. He wasn't upset about it anymore because it's a week old. Right. And he's like, you know what? Yeah, I guess I should have done what the coach told me to do. And then it would have solved the problem. So the timing, we got to get good at this.
Well, and I think now that I'm a new baseball dad, right? I've seen the baseball dads, and there's some of them are intense.
Yeah.
And if you're a baseball dad out there, calm down.
Chill.
Okay. but I will say I had a moment at practice the other night with my older one. He's been taking pitching lessons because he wants to pitch. And so they had him on the mound and he got up there and he didn't do a single thing that the coach that we've been paying for him to do. Yeah. He didn't do a single thing because it's outside of his team. So we're doing that. We also have this other guy doing it. And so I held my tongue because I wanted to stand up and be like the baseball dad and be like, what are you doing?
We're paying all this money for lessons.
And so, but I didn't. And because I didn't, he corrected himself. And I could tell he was getting frustrated. I could tell that he was sensing the consequences of the actions and everything. So I think to that point too, that sometimes it depends on what's wrong that needs to be addressed. I needed him to address that within himself. And it wasn't, one of the main problems, I was going to say it's not hurting anybody else. It's just him, but he actually did hit a kid in the head while he was pitching. So that's when I was like, I kind of stood up, I was like, whoops. But sometimes it's when they're doing something wrong, it is for them to keep learning, I think. Right. And when we chime in the timing of when we chime in is more of what's using our own discernment, what's going to be wise for me to say right now, or what's going to be wise for me to not say right now.
That's good.
You know what I mean?
I love these first 2 points. Should I say this? Got to consider that. Should I say this now? Got to consider that. And then the third point here is what should I say? And all of this, just so you know, is from an article that Ted, you actually wrote. It's on our All Pro Dad site right now. We're going to put the link down in the show notes and it's really worth diving in on. Share it with some other dads. I think it's worthwhile. But that third point, what should I say? That's just as important of deciding if you should say anything at all. What do you actually say to help correct your kid?
So Ted.
Yes.
You have children that are older.
Right.
When we have kids that are younger, they're not doing the stupid things they're doing don't carry a lot of severity, I think, to some degree.
Yeah.
For you, what have been those moments with your kids? I mean, you don't have to share the situation, but like, I think sometimes as they get older, the problems become more severe.
Right.
So how do you deal with that?
When they started getting older, I think the more and more you ask questions to help them discover what the situation was instead of demanding or preaching at them, that's when I would see them shut down. It's like, oh, I'm in trouble.
Gotcha.
They start responding more than that. So I think a lot of questions for that. I always need more and more space with this because it does get more complicated. So my wife Nancy and I will talk about it. I'll reach out to somebody about it. We talked episode about how to help you be a better dad. Like, who are the people to help you do that? There's been times I've reached out or I've even said, hey, I'm going to let this guy tell them at church because he can hear it better right now from them. And so I think for us, it's more questions and it's just, you got to be even more careful, more kind, more generous, and sometimes just more clear. The biggest thing for me is say what you need to say and be done.
Oh, that's so hard for me.
Oh, yeah. I'm the worst.
I talk in circles like crazy.
Well, what you do is you get your wife to do what mine is, who gives me a blink, like, that's enough, buddy.
Yeah.
Like she'll go, that's enough. And we'll have the talk. She actually, one of the things that we have is I can get amped up. Like if I don't give myself a pause, I'm on it, man. And I'm crafting words and here's how this is going to work and blah, blah, blah. And she'll look at me. And I've heard Mark and Susan, who are founders of, Family First. And she used to say to Mark, hey, Mark, do you need some water? Like kind of this thing of like, you need to pause, you need to cool it. And so
I have it. I'm going to give my wife a microphone. And, to make sure that it's like we're putting out like a common front, like we're on the same team. Like if she thinks I've gone too far or I said the thing that I need to say. I'm going to tell her, just jump in and drop that mic. Be like, oh,
Yeah.
and then I'll be like,
my wife
Yes,
actually,
let's go with
she'll just tap me on the leg. Like if we're sitting down next to her, she'll just under the table, 2 taps or whatever. I'm like, oh, I've been talking too long. Sorry.
Buck probably needs something more demonstrative. That's a good Bobby. I'm going to do a tap. Buck, you need to drop the mic.
drop a mic.
I just need to get the look. So whatever that is to kind of calm me down there. So I think you've just got to be more careful and more kind because they're so fragile as teenagers too. Their egos are so and so.
But you said something I think is interesting, and is it because of this? Like you said, I want to ask more questions and have them chew on it or like come to the conclusion themselves. Is it the whole idea, like the benefit of hearing yourself say what the problem was? Is that what it is?
I think when they feel like that you're preaching at them or demanding, that makes them emotional. So now you're dancing with the emotional part. When you say, "Hey, tell me, I really want to know. Help me unpack this."
Yeah.
It makes them engage their frontal lobe more. It says, "Oh, I'm going to have to engage this, and I'm going to have to come up with my own answers." And there's been time when we used to say, "Okay, help us here because we don't know what the consequence. They've got to be one." We didn't do this much, but occasionally we go, what do you think your consequence should be? Especially if it was something really big. We're like, whoa, you've blown our minds here. And what's so funny, there's been a couple of times they've given themselves worse consequences than I would have given them. I was like, okay. All right. Wow. You're going to paint the house. Fantastic.
Well, I was glad to hear you say it and walk away, because I think as dads, we don't want our kids to fall into trouble. We don't want our kids to do the wrong thing. And so we can have a tendency to just overcorrect. And I know that I'll do this. It's like, all right, listen, there's going to be a nugget of truth in the next 45-minute lecture. So you're just going to listen to it. And it's too much.
Bobby.
Whereas if your words are really helpful, because sometimes one sentence is enough. Yeah. And if I decide to give 4 sentences, it just maybe loses its power, loses its punch, and I don't want my message to be ineffective when I'm correcting.
That's good.
I want it to be as effective as possible, and more words doesn't necessarily mean more impact, I think.
That's good. What's our final one?
Final point, I think, is really important. It says, how should I follow up? We don't want this to be a one-time correction where we're in, we're out, and then good luck, hope it sticks. It's how should I follow up on my correction?
Yeah, I circle back around.
Yeah. Well, and I think sticking to your guns. I think the more times that we, do a correction and it'll have a consequence to it. A lot of times the consequences hurt us too. I mean, because it's like, I don't want to not be able to go to this one thing, but because you messed up, none of us can go now.
Right.
I think a lot of times we can maybe kind of eat our words back.
Right.
A little bit. And I think that's more detrimental to the situation. And so again, my kids are younger and the consequences are a little bit sillier, but last weekend, my boys did something crazy and it had consequences. And right now our kids only play video games on the weekend. And that's the same for, if they're getting a tablet or a computer out, it's to do schoolwork and that's it. But on the weekend, it's free game, fair game, whatever. Video games and all that stuff. And so, but they did something and the consequence was for that weekend, there's no video games. And they were like, Dad, does that even mean you? I was like, yeah, it does. And I like playing, like, that's one of the things we like to do is to play video games together. And so I like playing video games with them, but the rule was no. I mean, none of it's turning on this weekend because of this issue. And so part of me was like, I want to play too. Yeah. I mean, it was a great Saturday. I had free time and it was kind of stormy and whatever. And the house was actually clean, but yeah, I couldn't. And so I think a lot of times we can go back on what we say a little bit or be a little bit more, I'm just trying to be gracious or forgiving. And that way, well, that's fine. But the more that you do that and the frequency of you doing that, it's going to make the consequences not stick as well.
So
the kids are not going to be like, oh, okay, yeah, sure, Dad.
So I'm going to follow up by keeping the consequence there. I think too, it's the follow up of how are you feeling about this? Last week we talked about XYZ. How are you feeling about that? The best thing I think is when you catch them doing the thing they got in trouble, right? Like, hey, bud, I love the way you're treating your sister. I know you guys had that thing last week and there was a consequence and all that. I
it's good.
love to get, well done, man. I'm proud of you. Those are those moments going, I think part of this correction thing is, we have to correct them sometimes. When do we do it? How to do it? All those things. But to make sure the behaviors we do want are just, well done. And again, it's different kids.
You're going back and you're saying we need to highlight the things that the consequence was this, the problem was this. Let's then follow back up throughout the week and highlight, hey, I really see you're changing in this.
Yep, I'm see it. Or how are you feeling about it? How are you doing about it? I know you're frustrated about this consequence. Just the thing of just catching them doing something right. I mean, we want people catching us doing stuff right. We never outgrow that, right?
Yeah.
All right. And on that note, Bobby, what is our pro move?
Pro move of the episode is choose one of the following points and apply it this week. We'll go over the 4 points from the episode again. 1, should I say this? 2, should I say it now? 3, what should I say? And 4, how should I follow up? Pick one of those things, apply it this week.
I like that. I wish someone had told me this early on. Look, I just want to rewind with my kids and start over.
We've been doing this trial by fire, guys. So that's why we made this podcast.
That is it. Hopefully we're saving you, through processing our pains and failures. But anyway, well, again, guys, thank you for joining us every time. We hope today has been helpful, and we'll see you next time.
Danny Tanner.
Thanks for listening to the All Pro Dad podcast. All Pro Dad is the fatherhood program of the nonprofit Family First. Along with our motherhood program, iMom, we exist to help you love your family well. Subscribe to our daily email, the All Pro Dad Play of the Day, by going to allprodad.com/subscribe and get daily powerful and practical fatherhood tips in your inbox. The All Pro Dad podcast is hosted by me, Ted Lowe, produced by Bobby Lewis. As we wrap up today, I want to share something that's important to us here at All Pro Dad. We believe that every child deserves to know the love of a mom and a dad. We hope you believe the same thing and might even be willing to take an extra step to change a child's life. Around the country, but especially in the state of Florida, where All Pro Dad is based, there's a pressing need for medical foster care parents. These foster care parents provide crucial support to children with complex medical needs. To be a medical foster care parent, you don't need a medical background. We've partnered with the local community-based care agencies and the Florida Department of Children and Families, who provide comprehensive training. If you can offer the vital medical assistance these children need, along with compassionate care in a family environment, you're prepared to be a true medical foster care champion. Learn more by visiting mfc.floridahealth.gov. That's mfc.floridahealth.gov.